Okay, you are Barbara Lawrence, and for what years have you served in the Kansas legislature?
I came in 3 years ago in 1987, and I've served one full term, and this is the beginning of my second term.
Okay, and you've always just been in the House?
Yes,
not,
yes.
Not any other position, okay. And you're a Republican?
I'm a Republican.
And when did you affiliate with the party, and how long have you been a Republican? And why did you affiliate with the party?
I don't ever remember affiliating with the party. I just have always been, I think I was born a Republican. Okay. I had a Republican spoon in my mouth or something. And I became active, actually, when I ran for office. I had never been really active in the party, but in philosophy I've always been a Republican, and I think that's because I grew up in a Republican household. It just seems like that is often why you are of a certain political persuasion. It's just the way you have been brought up, the way you view life.
That's interesting. Can you describe your first election and your most recent one? Are there similarities, differences in them, and how did you come to the decision to run the first time?
I had worked on 2 campaigns for friends of mine, one a gubernatorial campaign, and then the next one for city commissioner. And I had met people that were active in politics. I had been caught up in the whole political arena and enjoyed it very much. I've always been interested in politics. I've always been very interested in issues. But I was busy raising a family and gave absolutely no thought ever to running. Although I had been relatively unhappy in that for 16 years I had been represented by someone whose political ideas were about 180 degrees from mine, and was never asked what I thought. Just my opinion did not seem to count. However, I will hasten to say that I didn't write that often either and express my opinion. So that was partially my fault, but it was never sought either. So through questionnaires or anything of that sort. And I just decided that when I was approached by 2 representatives from Wichita that I knew to challenge the incumbent, it was a good time in my life because our children were grown and out of the nest, off our payroll, and I just thought it would be a good time in my life to try for something like this. My husband has a job where he travels quite a lot, so the separation wasn't anything that new, and he also Topeka is part of his territory, so he can come up here and stay part of the time, and it just doesn't. And I go home every weekend, so it just doesn't seem like that much of a separation or that new to me. So I decided that I would like to run for it, and I would say that there were, of course, many similarities between the two, but there were also many differences. In the first race, I was so naive. I didn't ever think I wouldn't win. That was never a consideration.
Wonderful. When did that change?
That changed in this second election. Yes. I came up here and heard about some of the entrenched incumbents who had been beaten the year before I came in, or the same year I came in, excuse me, and they were ones that were at that time running for leadership positions. They had been here that long, they were that entrenched in the whole thing, and on one issue were defeated. And so then with the tax issue, and with the feeling of kick all the bums out feeling among the people, I really realized that there was a tremendous possibility that I could be defeated, because it was my first year to run after my initial attempt, and that's always when the candidate's most vulnerable. And so I thought, this is possible to do. So I ran that second time as hard or harder than I ran the first time, and ran just about the same type of campaign I did the first time. And I did not have a primary either time. But I ran as though I were having one, which I think I will probably always do. I think it has served me well. And so, in answer to your question, there were a lot of similarities, but there were some differences too.
Well, this your first time you ran. Who was your opponent?
Her name was Connie Cunard. She was a one-term incumbent. She had been mayor of Wichita. And on the city commission for quite a while, and then had run for a seat that was being vacated by a veteran of 16 years. And she ran on the same ticket and was actually the hand-picked candidate by that particular incumbent. And she had served in those 2 years.
What kind of an election year was it? I mean, what kind of a campaign did you have?
That first year?
How did you
was
campaign?
Kind of an ordinary. It was a presidential year.
That's right.
It was really no burning issues at that time on the state level. That they were attacking the retirement plan, and that was a biggie, and that was what got a couple of them defeated. But I, of course, had no part in that, so that didn't affect the way I ran. I ran a campaign that was just actually selling myself. I had no one issue that I was terribly interested in the economy of Kansas, very interested in the highway plan. But other than that, I had no burning special interest, just a desire to represent the people very well. So that time, I filed by petition so that I went around in the neighborhoods where I had my strength, and I think I got something like 500 signatures on the petition, and met the people that time. I went around once in the primary, and then went back and to every home.
Oh my goodness!
And then back again in the general to every home. So in effect, in some of those precincts, I called on them 3 times that year. But I felt it was very necessary for my name recognition, and I got to visit with the people. I got to know the people, and that's the fun part of it. It's really interesting, and I think in talking with other candidates, it's such a mental hurdle to get out that door at 4 o'clock every afternoon. It's just almost insurmountable some days. When you get out there and knock that first door, it's over, and you're having a good time. But you just have to draw on your past experience with knowing that even in 110-degree weather, that it still is fun to meet people.
It's pleasant.
It is. It really is.
Well, did you do the same kind of door-to-door campaign?
Absolutely. Yes, I didn't go around twice to all the precincts. I did in my new precincts, because we redrew the lines the year before. And so I had added to my old district. I had some taken off, but I had, let's see, I think I had 4 new precincts added. And so I went to them twice, and the others then I went once. But in between the year, the non-election year, I had gone around also once.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
My goodness.
So I have become very well acquainted with all the cracks in the sidewalks in my district.
And dogs.
And all the dogs. Yes, indeed. Oh, every household, I think it's a law. Every household has to have one dog.
Every block has to have one that growls at you.
Yes, yes. And they're never, well, yeah, some of them are little, but the little ones always bite your ankles, and the big ones just look at you in the eyes. Want to go for your jugular.
Well, in your second campaign, did you have a strong candidate or a hard race?
I had a hard race, partly because of the tax issue.
I see.
People
Everybody
were
was
angry. They were just angry, and none of the national candidates or the congressional candidates came around to their door.
Oh.
The ones that came around to their door were the state candidates. We were the ones that got their anger, and we were the ones that they identified with all the problems. It was really interesting when Congress got so bogged down in the budget. People came to the door and were just furious at me for the budget.
They couldn't keep you straight.
That's right. They do have a difficult time separating the state issues from local and federal. And most of the time, some of the time they'll even admit they don't even know what the state government really does. And it's changing so much that some of us don't know.
Yeah, that's really true.
And
well, if you could, you told me a little bit that the candidate who had represented you was like 180 degrees different from your opinion.
Yes.
Were there other factors that influenced you besides that? Were there other factors that influenced you to run that first time? Were there people? What was the mix of things that made you decide?
The two legislators that approached me to run, as I said, were friends of mine. I had been up here several times as a guest of one of them, and had met some of the people up here, had watched the legislative process, had just observed from the outside what went on, and just thought that this was something I'd really like to do. I did test the waters. I went around to some of the people that I knew in Wichita that were those who had been through campaigns with other people, and they encouraged me to run. As I went door to door, I realized that there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the person that was representing us, and that was an encouragement too. So I just plunged right on.
How did you finance your campaigns? Did you ask for?
I had to go out and ask for money.
donations.
It cost me $18,000 to run.
Goodness.
And that was not a lavish campaign at all. It was restricted to yard signs and direct mailings, and that was pretty much it as far as the money end of it. The door-to-door I consider the chief element, the most important block in that whole puzzle. And of course that doesn't cost anything but Sheila.
Yeah.
But direct mail is incredibly expensive. Newspaper advertising is not available to those of us who live in urban areas, especially the Wichita area, because the expense is prohibitive. I spent $800 on one ad, and it was just an eighth of a page. And
my goodness,
there was just no way that you can avail yourself of a newspaper unless you have a small community paper. So that's out. And we are just really relegated. The media does not cover us that much. You know, they're always too interested if there was a county commission race that was going on at the same time as ours. people were far more interested in that. Natural, they always are, because that's closer to home. They keep track of the daily goings on at the county or the city level, whereas we're up here, and then at the federal level, it's the same thing. So we're really kind of up here, and they're not too interested. Or, not that, that's not true. They're not as aware of what we do. In fact, if you would go up and down the streets of most of Sedgwick County's districts, probably 1 out of 7 could tell you who their state representative is. And
goodness, that's a small
yes, it is.
percentage, isn't it?
It really is. So we don't get much media play.
Did they endorse you or your
No,
opponent?
they did not. They
just stayed
They
out of
endorsed
it?
my opponent.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Do you think that was a factor in any way? It did,
It
obviously,
was
it
terribly
didn't hurt you.
frightening when they did that. But no, in fact, they didn't have a very good track record this time.
Maybe they didn't anywhere this time.
That could be.
Did they in your first election
No,
too?
they have never endorsed me. No, they have never chosen.
Well, did anyone precede you in the legislature? Anyone in your family or good friend? Well, you said you had 2 friends, but
Yes.
Anyone directly?
My husband's great-grandfather was a senator
And what
from
was his
Wichita.
name?
Robert E. Lawrence, and he was one of the early settlers in Wichita, and then came up here as a senator.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
Yes. So, and then
What years was he in the legislature?
Oh, I can't tell
As a
you.
senator.
I can't tell you. It was in the. I think it was in the 1880s, late 1880s.
And you'd heard about that, I suppose.
Well, he kept a diary,
Oh.
and the family has that diary.
Oh,
And,
that'd be interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating. It is fascinating because he became a millionaire through cattle farming out here, and then lost it all in that depression of what was it, 1882 or something.
Oh, yes.
Like that.
Oh, my
He
goodness.
was a community leader early on, but then he lost it. So,
Do you think that him having been there and you knowing about that had anything to do with your...
I think so, because my husband's grandfather also was mayor of Wichita at in the 30s.
Oh.
And yes, it has been sort of a tradition, and I felt a certain amount of pride in that, and also responsibility, because the family had always been very community minded.
I see.
And I had always worked in the community also, and felt that there was a certain obligation that you have to your community and to the state. I was born in Emporia.
Oh.
And I don't know, Kansas is really very unique and very special in my life. And I've always taken a great pride in being a Kansan. And so I felt like, I really would like to be a part of making the state, keeping it something that is unique and special.
Well, you say you represent Wichita. What part of Wichita?
Well,
Is
I
your
say
district?
East Central.
East Central.
It's just, actually, it goes about, it's about 3 miles long, maybe, and, well, no.
Is it urban? Is all
It's
your
all
district
urban. All urban, and a very interesting mix, because I have a large black area and minority area, and then I have probably one of the, well, without a doubt, the wealthiest neighborhoods in Wichita.
It must
So
be kind of tricky to
It
represent.
is
that.
very difficult, because I have then everything in between as far as the socioeconomic, the educational,
Yeah.
just everything, and so it's not easy to do.
Were you, from the first election to the second election, did the district get changed in the redistricting?
Not that dramatically. They really balanced it. Maybe it did tip a little bit more to the higher socioeconomic, but then I got another precinct in the lower.
So they did change your boundaries slightly, but not
yes,
not to the point that they changed the mix.
Not that dramatically, no, because it's still not heavily Democratic district, but still a Democratic district.
Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the issues you've been involved in. First of all, you say that you're the person whose place or whose seat you took or replaced had 180-degree differences from you in the issues. What can you describe what these issues were? And how?
My main issue when I came up here, and it was short term in one way, but it will probably be an 8-year project, was the highway plan. It was it impacted our community as well as the state, as I see it, dramatically. And she had opposed that. And our people were very strongly behind that. And so that was really the big issue. I would say that I am far more pro-business than she was. She was definitely into the social issues, which I also am very, very interested in, especially the women's and children's issues. Very concerned about that. But as I see the picture, we first have to keep our economy very healthy and make sure that the tax base that we have doesn't erode any farther, so that we can fund our educational system and our social programs. Education also is another very important issue as far as I'm concerned. I'm a teacher, and I feel very strongly about those issues. Not that she didn't, but I think probably our ideas about where the money is going to come from to fund these issues is probably just very different.
Okay, that's real clear then how you feel about those issues. Did you focus on these issues then in the election campaigns?
Yes, I did, especially the highway issue again.
You think it made a difference?
I think it did. I really do. However, I have come to really believe that especially a state election, now it's probably different in others, but in a state election for a state representative, that issues are not the important thing. It's the person. People like to feel that they can trust this individual, that this individual will truly represent them, will listen, will respond, and care about what they're concerned about. And over and above that, as I said, they're seldom really aware of state issues unless they're really big ones that impact them, and the tax issue certainly was that. I think
they got their attention.
They got very interested in that.
Well, now, are you kind of following these same issues, or have you added any to the list after you have been in the legislature?
As I say, the highway bill we passed that first year I was here, but as I see it now, we're really going to have to stay on top of that, or we won't have the monies for that. So I see that as an ongoing program until we're finished with that project. And no, I still am very concerned about what we're going to do to our economy, especially now that we have the tax program that we have been handed. I feel that we're going to have to we're going to have to get very creative, I think, with her budget, because I will always feel that we have to keep our economy growing. The growing number of elderly that we have in this state is not due to our population growing older any faster than anybody else's.
Right.
It's because our youth are leaving the state, and they're leaving for one reason. I talk to kids coming out of college. They want to stay in Kansas. They like Kansas. They realize that this is a good state to raise their children in, but the opportunities are not here in abundance. And I just feel very strongly that we have to create those opportunities for these kids, because this is our brain trust, this is our workforce. We just have to keep them here.
Okay, besides these issues you mentioned a little while ago, something about women's issues.
Yes.
Would you say there are issues then that are identified as women's issues?
I hate that word. I hate that word because no, I don't.
Okay, good.
I just don't think they are women's issues. I think, and I see this coming together. I see men realizing these are not just women's issues. That and it has come about because the kids that we have raised in this last generation are now getting into the workforce, and they're impacting the pocketbook, and that always speaks loud and clear to all of us. But now that they have hit and can't read, can't write, can't spell, can't figure, the men are saying, wait, what are we going to do for an educated workforce in a time when we are going into high technology and we need really super educated people? And you trace that back. We shake our fist at the educational system, but if you really go farther than that, which you have to do, you'll find out it has to do with home, first and foremost and almost first and last. It's what's happening to and in the home, or what's not happening, and it's what's not happening in our early education of our children, or our early care of the children. And so that used to be considered a woman's issue, but if you want preventive measures, you have to go back there. And that's why I hate to see us as women identify them as women's issues. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake to pull away from the men and where actually the power has been and still is to a large extent. I think we should be moving this way and pulling them in toward us rather than just dividing ourselves and saying, well, the women will meet in a caucus, and I feel that this is counterproductive, and I think it's a mistake at this point. I think we need to really educate the men as to why they need to get involved. And when they do, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on, are we in this for the power, or are we in this for really to get things done? And if we are, then we will forge coalition rather than divide.
What conference was
it was
this?
a conference of Midwest women legislators.
This is what I remember talking to you about that earlier. We need to find out more about that.
Yes. Harriet Woods, she has a center for something or another. I'll look it up.
Okay.
Wonderful conference. Her wonderful speakers. But I felt uneasy in that I just felt it dividing, and kind of nurturing that feeling of divisiveness. And I think, and as I say, these women were wonderful and got great ideas. But I do feel if we are interested in something besides power, that we need to be very careful about doing, because the men always know, the men look at that and think, you know, and what that does also, what men then are going to volunteer to get involved in that. You know, they're not going to then of their own volition volunteer to get into those things because the women are leading. And we need their insight too, I think. Anyway.
Well, on all of these issues now, even that we've talked about, how would you describe your position? Are you conservative or liberal, or do you prefer some other term, or how would you describe yourself?
I think I've tried to be a moderate. My bent may be more conservative, but I don't represent a conservative area totally. I mean, they might be conservative in one area, but in another not so conservative. So I try not to be maybe as conservative as I would be as a voter, as just a voter, because I do know I have something like 1,500 or 1,600 laboring families, and they need to have their interests looked after here, and so you know, I would say a moderate.
Well, you're no longer a freshman legislator this year, but as a freshman legislator, did you have a mentor or someone that sort of helped you find your way around and get on committees?
No, I really didn't. And that was one thing that a friend of mine who was also a freshman legislator last time decided that we wanted to see put in place, because there were no mentors for the Republicans at that time. We had one young girl from Leavenworth who was wonderful. She really took it upon herself, just because she chose to do it, not because she was assigned or that anybody had any formal structure. But she took it upon herself to show us the letters she wrote, you know, give us ideas, give us all the speeches she gave, just took us under her wing and was wonderful. So we determined that that's one thing that we wanted to put in place this time, and it is now being done.
Oh, well, good. I didn't know about that.
Yes, and on a formal basis, and I am delighted. I just I'm hoping that it works well, and it will all depend on the individual mentor. I'm sure. How
well, you were assigned then to help certain. Well, there were 37 new legislators in the House.
Let me see how many Republicans.
There's 35 in the House and some in the Senate. I can't remember the numbers.
30. No, because the Senate didn't.
But wasn't there one or two?
Well, there were, and I'm not sure what they do. But we're, I believe, there were 35 in the House. Yeah, and 2 in the Senate.
That's what I started.
Yes.
How is this work? This is just for the Republicans.
Well, I'm sure. No, the Democrats have always done it.
Oh, they have.
Yes, they have always done it. This is the first year since I've been here that they have done it on the Republican side, and I'm hoping that this really works well.
Well, good. That's really interesting. What committees did you serve on your first 2 years, and are you still on the same committees?
I'm on one. I was in judiciary last time, and I chose to keep that this time because I really had. It took me 2 years to learn the language. Now I know what they're talking about on occasion, and so I wanted to stick around and at least try to contribute something. But I enjoyed that because of the issues that come through there. It's been very interesting. And then I was on transportation, which I got on in a wonderful year because the highway plan came through there, and I was really excited about being on that. And I was on labor and industry. And so this year I gave up transportation and labor and industry, and I'm on federal and state affairs and governmental organization.
So you have some new committees.
I have 2 new.
Okay, have you had, are you in leadership positions on any of those
No,
committees?
I'm not.
Sure you wouldn't be.
No. Unfortunately.
Okay, during your last term, and probably this term it's too early to really tell too much about it, but can you kind of describe the power structure in the legislature? And you have had just one.
Well, that's very interesting because the first day of my first term, they had major rule changes brought on by what they later called the rebel group. And it did take some of the power away from the leadership in the House. And we had absolutely no idea what was going on, but everyone was thunderstruck. And everybody was just sure that this would bring the House down and around their feet, and just, it was a major trauma. And we stood around trying to figure out what had happened. We knew a bomb had dropped, but we didn't know where and we didn't know what. And so it did change it dramatically. I have no history as to how it worked before that time, but we were at the House as a whole now is able to bring bills out of committee with fewer votes than before, so they have a little bit more control over what does come out of committees. Took a little bit more of the power away from the Speaker and gave it to the rest of the House members. I see that, I can see how leadership really shapes the form of the legislation that comes out. And I think that we do not have the power brokers that we used to have in the House. I think that things have changed, though it's more democratic than it was in the past. And also, we're dealing with much heavier issues now than they did 20 years ago, insofar as the new federalism has really come down, and we are being given the responsibility for issues that were usually federally mandated before. And so it's a little more serious place than I hear it used to be. But this is what all the old hands say, that the power was really in the Speaker's hands before we came, and the issues were not maybe quite as, they didn't have as many, I'll put it that way, as many really tough issues.
Well, now, do you participate? We mentioned this women's coalition.
Yes.
Have you participated in any coalitions or formal groups or informal groups within the legislature while you've been here?
No, I really have not. I've tried to keep, here again, kind of, I officed with one of the rebel group, and so it was kind of a central meeting place for them. So I did get in on, I was privy to a lot of their discussions, and you know, could support a lot of the things that they came up with. And yet I was really more mainstream, so that I did continue in that direction. And because I'm not in leadership, then, you know, you don't get in on that kind of a coalition. And I don't see so many. I see a much more cohesive Republican delegation this time. I hope that remains true, because we were so divided last session, and I don't think we are at this point this session.
Well, did you go in to any of the meetings with the Women's Coalition or participate in any respect with that group last year?
Yes, I was one of the Steel Magnolias, and that was a very loose, very kind of spontaneous, really happening. We just had this issue that we all felt very strongly that we could support, and all of a sudden we decided that we were going to unify and vote, and we passed that. And
what was that issue?
That was a program that added to the WICS program. That Healthy Start is one of the parts of that addresses problems of mothers who are pregnant and will soon give birth, and then that infant. Also programs for that.
It's like at-risk families.
Yes, and what it does, which I was so excited about because I think this is the answer, it sends workers into that house when that child is just an infant to teach parenting skills, to tell that mother that, and this is an ongoing program until I think 3 years of age, you know, that what she's seeing and the development of that child is normal or maybe not. We just heard testimony the other day that one of the workers found that this child was very seriously hearing impaired, and the doctor had not caught it. But because of its delayed development, this worker could see it. The mother didn't realize it. You know, she didn't have anything to compare it with particularly. But the worker caught it, and so, you know, here was early intervention.
Yes, and important.
Oh, absolutely. And to me, that's the answer. If you solve or not solve them, but if you identify the problems very early on, many times they will not grow into something that is really insoluble.
Well, were you one of the sponsors of that legislation?
No, it was an amendment on a bill, and no, I was not. But we saw it coming.
I see.
And then just right there on the floor, just, you know, kind of banded together and voted on it.
What bills have you sponsored or carried?
I sponsored a bill. I sponsored, well, I co-sponsored several, but one bill that I drafted and sponsored dealt with, I thought, a very non-controversial subject. It was, we have the AFT and the NEA representing, not representing, but always vying to represent our teachers in our system. And this bill had to do with their rights of representation and all, and limited some of the things that the non-representative group could do. And it was actually done because we had an election at least every 2 years, and sometimes more, for the last 8 or 10 years, and it was very disruptive, and it did cause factions that really didn't heal very well.
Now, is this just in the Wichita area?
Only in the Wichita. AFT is the only one that only in Wichita. So this would have curtailed that somewhat. And I had no idea. It went through the House committee. No one from AFT testified. It went through the Senate committee. I think it was 125 to nothing, or maybe 124 to 1 through the House. No dissensions in the Senate. You know, just no problem whatsoever. The school boards didn't fight it at all. Got down to Wichita, and that's why the paper didn't endorse me. They
really?
Yeah. So it just blew sky high. So that, and it was used in the campaign very heavily against me. So that's why I was very reluctant to get back into that, you know, to do anything, you know, before I really, I don't know, I think I would still do it because of the disruption that has gone. But what it has resulted in is the AFT is proposing that they join together and work together, which I think is a marvelous solution.
Well, and your bill was signed by the governor then, so it became law. But it was after that, you say, that this impact suddenly appeared.
Just blew up in my face, just like I held a firecracker and it went off right in my hand.
Well, I was just going to ask you, what are some of the issues or bills that have caused
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. That was it, Andy.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, dear.
Well, do you have any vivid memories of any other incidences besides maybe the bills themselves, or any experiences you've had in legislature? Humorous, serious, whatever?
Well, we were voting on the one of the appropriations bills, and this was when we were cutting some of the programs, or trying to cut some of the funding, and it was the mentally impaired, I think, that they were proposing cuts, and I knew how desperately we needed to cut somewhere, but I also knew what this program meant to a lot of my people, and it was a very difficult decision. The vote was it passed to fund it by one vote.
Oh my goodness.
And so the leadership came back and said, would you please make a motion to reconsider, because you were on the prevailing side. And the speaker asked me to do that.
My goodness.
And I said, well, I want to talk this over with some of the people that I know work in the field, and I want to know just exactly what we're up against. And so they brought him back to the majority leader's office, and I talked with them, and they waited for the vote, and I came back and I said, I can't make that motion. And boy, he was mad. He was really upset with me, but I just felt like I couldn't do that. That they were able to find money for things that they felt strongly about. So I felt strongly about that, and so I decided not to make that.
Did anyone else that was on the prevailing side come forward? Or?
No.
So it went.
It went.
It went. Very interesting. Do you have any other experiences, any funny things or anything you think of?
Well, this didn't happen to me, but one of my freshman colleagues and friends had been very active on the abortion issue, and when Idaho took that vote, and the governor then vetoed that bill, that abortion bill, a bunch of people just came up with a whole bushel of potatoes and dumped them on his
That's
face.
right.
That was, there are so many funny incidences that I can't recall any particular one, but
that was memorable.
That was memorable. I think that, this friend of mine who was so helpful and mentored my friend and I, was defeated this last time. And one of the things that they got her on was selling pantyhose on the floor. Well, what had happened was that we decided it would be fun on Valentine's Day to just all wear Valentine hose, and so all she did was just say, give me your orders, and put them on my desk on the floor. Well, that's the only time that we really all are together and see each other. So instead of calling us, she just said, well, they use that, do you know what your representative was doing? She was selling pantyhose on the floor. And the fact of the matter is that things get so intense up here. And the air gets so thick and so heavy, and we get so angry at times that you have to break that.
Sure.
Or we would really just kind of fly to pieces. And this was just one of those times that we just had decided that, and it isn't a time when anything is particular. We can be recessed, but have to stay on the floor, you know. And this is just time when you know, kind of relax and kick back. It's just that the public eye is on you.
Yeah.
You know,
Press.
and at the press. And so it's. I think we'll probably cut back on some of those times. And it's too bad because it's a safety valve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions now about yourself.
Okay.
Are you a native Kansan?
Yes. I was
Where were
born
you
in
born?
Emporia.
Okay.
And was there through college and then...
clear through college.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't leave home until I was about 22.
Did you live in town then?
Yes, yeah. Lived in town. So then we did spend 2 years in Germany in the service and lived over there.
Now you say we. Who's...
My husband and I.
Oh,
he was
I
in.
see.
He was in there. Yes.
Well, can you describe your family a little bit? Your parents and any brothers or sisters?
I have a brother, and my parents were. My father was the business manager at the college in Emporia.
I see.
And so I grew up in that kind of an atmosphere. We had a very, I don't know, just a very ordinary, I'm sure, childhood, very comfortable childhood in a small town. And my brother is 18 months older than I, so do come in. Then I was married out of college, and his home was Wichita, so we moved down there. And
that's how you got to Wichita.
That's right. Yes. He was a native of Wichita. We raised 3 children, and through the school system there, one of our children, I say took the college smorgasbord. She started out at K-State and went to UMKC and ended up at Friends University and took some courses at WSU.
My goodness.
Oh gosh, that was not smart or wise. She was finding herself. Then our middle son went to Oklahoma City University, graduated from there, and our youngest son graduated from WSU.
Oh, for goodness sakes. Well, what did you major in when you were in college at Emporia?
I majored in sociology and psychology, and minored in music.
And you were taught before?
I taught for a year and a half after we were married, when we were first married, before we started our family. And I taught in Germany even. I taught at American Dependent School in Heidelberg.
What did you teach?
I taught kindergarten there.
Okay.
And then our first child came along, so I didn't teach at all until our youngest was a junior in high school. And then I started back, and I saw it was such a dramatic change as far as the children were concerned. And I was able to see that because of that long hiatus. And I saw children that were raised differently from our children and from their friends. And that was when I began to realize that we really had a problem. I promise.